Ladies and gentlemen, the academic procession will enter shortly. You are kindly requested to stand.
Bomma le botate, molokolo wa dirutegi o tla tsena mo nakong ye kopana. Le kgopelwa go ema.
Ladies and gentlemen, we request that you join us in either silent prayer or meditation to give thanks for the achievements of our students. Thank you. As the Deputy Vice Principal of the University of Pretoria, it is my privilege this afternoon to extend to all of you, on behalf of the university, a warm word of welcome to this graduation ceremony. I would like to acknowledge with us this afternoon the Dean, Prof. Skuman, the Director of the Department of Enrollment and Student Administration, Dr. Matega, the High Commissioner of Malawi, Ms. Stella Ndau, the Honourable Minister Yvonne Dassault, Minister of Justice from Namibia, the Honourable Justice Retson Kapindu, Judge of the High Court of Malawi, Inigo Febrel, Head of the Political and Press Section of the European Union Delegation in South Africa, the Ambassador of the Czech Republic, other members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of the faculties or schools of law of the partner universities in the Masters in Human Rights and Democratization in Africa from Abomey Kalawi University, St. Louis, Senegal in Addis Ababa, the Catholic University of Central Africa in Makerere in Uganda, the University of Ghana, the University of Mauritius, the University of Venda, and the University of the Western Cape. Members of civil society organizations, chairpersons of schools, heads of departments, directors, emeriti and honorary professors, lecturers and their spouses and partners, representative of the Student Representative Council, all members to whom degrees will be conferred this afternoon, all spouses, parents, partners, and other parties, as well as dignitaries who may we not be aware of. You are all acknowledged and welcome here this afternoon. It is indeed a privilege for me to congratulate the student achievers who will be receiving their degrees in human rights law today. You can indeed be proud of this day. You have run the race with excellence and perseverance, and you've crossed the finishing line, not without a good deal of sweat and labor, I am sure. The University of Pretoria is proud of your achievement and honored to have you as part of Africa's top faculty of law. You have been equipped to become a key driving force behind access to justice, to create and ensure an equitable, just, and fair society for all. And we are excited by how you will take on this most critical challenge at this point of our time. But we also want to thank your family, your parents, your guardians, your friends, your spouses, your partners, who've played an important role in getting you to this point today. I also want to extend my gratitude to the University of Pretoria's law donors and friends of this faculty, whose enduring support enables the potential and capacity to produce world-class graduates, and we do. Because these graduates will go on to achieve significant things for the greater good, and your support is enabling that. We truly appreciate your contribution. During her inaugural speech as Chancellor of the University of Pretoria earlier this year, Justice Sisi Kampempe reflected on her four-decade-long legal career, which she dedicated to upholding the principle of equality. She said that while the focus for many years in our country was on the attainment of a democratic society, that it is something we have now achieved. Our young people, however, she remarked, who across the board played such a critical role in confronting the apartheid system in the fight for a just society, have a different fight now, and that is of defending our Constitution and its commission, in particular to improve the quality of life of all citizens and to free the potential of each person in a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. So while South Africa remains an unequal nation, I think when we look across the continent, we see the same levels of inequality. We see the myriad of challenges that are facing our country being replicated across the continent. And you play a significant role and will play a significant role in addressing all of these challenges. Human rights are needed to protect and preserve every individual's humanity, to ensure that every person can live a life of dignity and a life that is worthy of being a human being. Knowledge and awareness of these rights, as you know, is critical in societal transformation and redress, and also in engendering social and political change. It could be argued that they are important for fostering the basic tenets of democracy, in which a government gives all adult citizens some share through their elected representatives, where all citizens treat each other as equal without discrimination, and where the rights of everyone is encouraged, allowed, and promoted. As a public university, the University of Pretoria is by no means an ivory tower, shut off from the realities of the world around us. In contrast, our vision, our strategic goals, and our associated priorities boldly profess the pursuit of the public good. We are an engaged university, a central player in the advancement of our country, of our society, and of the continent at large. We are responsive to national priorities, regional challenges, and global challenges, given the multiple disruptions and crises which plagues us and which are symptomatic of the deep fault lines in the way we live on our planet. Now, as you move forward into the world and into your chosen niche, we trust that by using the law for good, in whichever position you may find yourself, as a practicing lawyer, as a member of civil society, as perhaps somebody who will enter judiciary or government, we trust and we put our faith in you that you will never lose faith in the capacity of the law to do justice, that you will strongly and visibly drive and be collaborative agents of change. Our hope for you is that you will find meaning, value, and inspiration in your professional life, which we hope that you can look back years from now and note that you have created a legacy which future generations can build on. Now, as we consider legacy, no speech today would be complete without a tribute to the late Professor Christoph Heyns, who held several positions at UP, including Director of the Center of Human Rights. He was also Dean of the Faculty of Law and founding co-director of the Institute for International and Comparative Law before his untimely passing in March of last year. As one of South Africa's greatest human rights activists, Professor Heyns made an immense contribution, working tirelessly for a new democratic South Africa, along with other legal minds, and making an important contribution to our Constitution. At UP, his legacy lives on through each and every student whose life was touched by his teaching. The Center for Human Rights, which Professor Heyns co-founded, turns 36 this year. Whilst it was initially aimed at apartheid, or fighting the fight against apartheid, the Center has subsequently embraced a broader Pan-African focus and has become an ardent advocate for the promotion and protection of human rights for all in Africa, and a proponent for a strong African human rights system. The Center has successfully invested in building a community of human rights advocates across the continent through its academic programs and its alumni network, as well as other educational tools such as the Advanced Human Rights Short Courses and Moot Court competitions. The Masters in Human Rights and Democratization in Africa is now also part of the Global Campus of Human Rights, a network of 7 leading master programs around the world. Graduates, keep up the hard work to continue to be the best of the best and to go out there and change the world. Your efforts will not go unrecognized. But be sure to also not neglect the little things either, the out-of-sight kindnesses and other people-centered actions. Those all speaks volumes in Professor Heyns' life, and which often, at the end of the day, makes the most difference. Thank you. I now request the Dean to introduce me to the candidates present whose names appear in the program.
Madam Vice Principal, the supervisors will now introduce the doctoral candidates to you.
Madam Vice Principal, I introduce to you Diana Atini Al-Musa, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Tax Incentives and the Realization of Economic and Social Rights, the Right to Basic Education in Uganda, prepared under my supervision and Professor Atia Waris as a co-supervisor. In this thesis, the candidate examined the impact of tax incentives, laws, and policies without a human rights lens on domestic revenue mobilization and, ultimately, revenue for the financing of economic and social rights. The study used the right to basic education financing deficits to demonstrate the impact of revenue losses and leakages from non-strategic tax incentives on the realization of the right to basic education in Uganda. The candidate ultimately makes a strong case for the infusion of human rights in fiscal policy formulation at all levels and for adopting a human rights compliant tax expenditure governance framework. Through this, substantial revenue could be realized for funding economic and social rights, specifically the right to basic education for universal primary education learners. Madam Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Madam Deputy Vice-Chancellor, I introduce you to Bianca Kapp, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled The Eligibility and Legal Protection of Female Athletes with Differences of Sex Development prepared under my supervision. In the thesis, the candidate examined the validity of World Athletics DSD eligibility regulations as applied by the Court of Arbitration for Sport in the Caster Semenya matter. The study not only focused on the contentious scientific basis on which regulations are based, but also identified the need for reform in current sports jurisprudence. The candidate argued that the regulations unfairly discriminate against female athletes affected by differences of sex development and violate universally recognized human rights. Furthermore, the candidate emphasized the underlying causes of DSD and explored why their occurrences are more prominently found in the populations of developing countries. The candidate ultimately makes a strong case that attention must be turned to the European Court of Human Rights to protect the livelihoods of female athletes with DSD and their right to dignity. Madam Deputy Vice-Chancellor, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I now confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Madam Vice Principal, I introduce to you Adebayo Okeewu, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctors of Law with a thesis titled Advancing Accountability for Human Rights Violations Through Citizen Media, an African Perspective. In this thesis, the candidate interrogated the barriers impeding the widespread use of citizen media evidence before domestic and international judicial mechanisms. The thesis analyzed select African states while drawing lessons from international courts and tribunals and other domestic courts around the world. In response to the finding that in several African countries the law of evidence is not sufficiently robust to meet the challenges of the digital era, the candidate developed a draft model law on citizen media evidence. Madam Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Madam Vice Principal, I introduce to you Bamisai Lulama Putwana. Apologies, I introduce to you Lulana Putwana, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled Improving Enforcement of Consumers' Rights under the Consumer Protection Act 68 of 2008, under the supervision of Professor J. Barnard. In this thesis, the candidate analyzed the regulatory redress framework for enforcing consumers' rights under the Consumer Protection Act 68 of 2008. The in-depth research acknowledged the importance of enforcement institutions and the nuanced routes of redress in terms of Section 69 of the Act. The numerous challenges consumers face in enforcing their rights were identified through a study of judicial decisions and rulings of the National Consumer Tribunal. The comparative overview of the U.S. Federal Trade Commission was imperative to determine the role and effectiveness of the institution central to the enforcement of consumer rights. The National Consumer Commission. A comprehensive study of the Australian enforcement legislative framework and mechanisms culminated in clear and achievable recommendations, including legislative amendments as well as practical proposals to improve the enforcement of consumers' rights under the Consumer Protection Act. Madam Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confirm the degree of Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Madam Vice Principal, I introduce to you Werner Skuman, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws with a thesis titled The Role and Liability of Auditors in Corporate Disclosures and Reporting, a Legal Analysis, prepared under the supervision of Professor M.M. Botha. In this thesis, The Role and Liability of Auditors in Corporate Disclosures and Reporting, a Legal Analysis, the candidate examined the role of auditors in mandated corporate accounting reports and disclosures and corporate voluntary sustainability disclosure and reporting as regulated by the Companies Act 71 of 2008 and the Auditing Profession Act 26 of 2005. Local and international developments in corporate disclosures and reporting affect the role and liability of auditors due to an increased emphasis on the significance of good governance in the private and public sectors, especially in relation to administration, management, and decision-making. The study made 13 recommendations. Calls are made for a shift in the focus on the role and liability of auditors in corporate disclosures and reporting away from over-regulation, which endeavours to regulate ethical conduct, causing further burdening of the majority of honest auditors around increased duties of compliance. The candidate proposed that a shift in focus to dishonest individuals should occur. Knowledge and proper enforcement of current regulations should result in effective penalties on wrongdoers, which in turn should serve as sufficient deterrents for potential fraudsters. Madam Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Madam Vice Principal, I introduce to you Linda Usoamaka Udekbuanam, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctors of Laws with his thesis titled Improving Access to Medicines for Persons with Psychosocial Disabilities in Nigeria in Realization of the Right to Health, the Role of WHO Aims and WHO Access to Medicines Framework, prepared under my supervision. In this thesis, the candidate demonstrated that despite progress made, low priority is assigned to actualizing provisions made by the policies and legal frameworks to enhance the right to health, and in particular access to medicines for persons with psychosocial disabilities. In practical terms, persons with psychosocial disabilities in Nigeria still face discrimination, an inability to access essential medicines and human resources, and the mental health systems with minimal responsiveness. Madam Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Madam Vice Principal, I present you Ms. Doris Uikeeza, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Laws on the basis of a thesis titled Addressing the Remedy Gap in Third-Party Claims Against the United Nations Peacekeeping Missions, prepared under my supervision. In this thesis, the candidate examines the remedy gap in claims against the United Nations that exists due to the immunity from national jurisdiction enjoyed by the UN, combined with a lack of effective or inadequate alternative dispute resolution mechanisms under international law. The remedy gap arises in part from an interpretation of UN instruments that conceives of UN immunity as being absolute. The study assesses the law of immunity of international organizations from multiple angles and perspectives with a view to achieving a balanced approach. The candidate argues for the need to preserve the functional independence of the UN while providing workable recommendations to bridge the identified gap through a comprehensive analysis of the principles in international instruments, comparative approaches to remedies, and the prevailing practice of actors in international law. Madam Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Laws with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Madam Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Master of Laws, Human Rights and Democratization in Africa. Miran Berhanu with distinction. Shireen Cherwa. Kaone Kautuse. Jonas Kakule. Justin Malok. Musupatsila Nare. Olabisi Olatunbosun. Florence Otieno. Kennedy Ovor. Sinisio Sambo with distinction. Benyo Sakati. Hinok Shebru with distinction. Firerai Sibanda with distinction. Emmanuel Tioko. Gerald Yakula. Madam Vice Principal. The following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the Masters of Laws in Multidisciplinary Human Rights. Zadia Ismail. Ndeli Tungapo Zakaria. Madam Vice Principal, the following students have complied with all the requirements for the degree Master of Philosophy, Human Rights and Democratization in Africa. Eva Abugabe. Bernice Asante. Afua Dua. Usinato Manyang with distinction. Elam Shanko with distinction. Madam Vice Principal, the following candidate has complied with all the requirements for the Masters in Multidisciplinary Human Rights. Bernadette Mendes. Thank you, Vice President.
Let us now give all of these graduates a big hand of applause for all of their work and perseverance. Graduates, I would like for you to turn around, look at those who have supported you, look to the front to those who have supported you, and give them a hand of applause. The audience is requested to resume their seats after the procession has left the aula for the second, more informal part of today's ceremony. But I now request you to stand for the singing of the national anthem, and then to remain standing until the assembly has been dissolved and the academic procession has left the auditorium. The words of the national anthem is printed on the inside back cover of today's program. Please rise. By the powers vested in me, I hereby dissolve this assembly of the University of Pretoria.
God!